All right. So the subject today is 40,000 plus years of unbroken Hindu civilization. Many of you would be aware a while ago, possibly 2-3 years ago, I gave a presentation. And the topic I said there was 17,000 plus years of unbroken Hindu civilization. And in that presentation, I said that actually it goes back way further. But right now I'm limiting it to 17,000, and that same thing I'm applying it here. It can go back, and I'm going to ask you, every listener, a question that indicates that it's going back. But I'm going to limit myself to just at the border of 40,000 years from today, going backwards. Okay, so quick highlight for this. Okay, if you have to think why I'm listening to this, or is this of any interest to me, I'm going to give you some highlight, as to what could be interesting thing. So one thing I'm going to discuss here is the puzzle of civilizational memory limit, and it appears to be 24,000 years. Okay, approximately 24,000 years. And this is not something I noticed it. This is something noticed by many others. I'll just briefly mention it, and I will give possible reason why it could be so. Okay, so that's it's good to know. Civilization may be very old, but it appears that the 24,000 appears to be a limit, and this is not a phenomenon limited to India. So that's something I want to briefly discuss today. The second one, I want to discuss a specific event that can take our civilization, that refers to our civilization to 40,000 years ago. And it doesn't limit it there, but it definitely takes us to that time frame. This is a particular evidence where a celestial evidence is brought together with the terrestrial evidence and brought together with a calendric evidence, and it takes us into that time frame, around 40,000, not exactly 40,000. All right. Then a message from me to you, again, not message as a holier than thou, but this is something very important for our civilizational development, our Indic Renaissance, and this is a suggestion. This is a whatever you want to call it. This is a must. This is something each of us need to do it in a hurry, but also teach people around us to do it in a hurry as well, which is say no to raw enthusiasm, whether it is the Antiquity of Indian civilization, whether it's any other aspects of Indian civilization or any civilization for that matter, and say yes to deep tapasya. Not many people realize, even to find out one single reference, how much effort, how much time it takes. Okay, so there is no point. So when I show you an event of 40,000 years ago, there is no point asking, oh, but do you have something for something that takes us to 50,000 years ago? No, that is your job. So that's like I'm saying, that's where the deep tapasya should come into the picture. If it was my today's talk title would have been 50,000 plus years of civilization. That is not to say the research is not happening. That is not to say the evidence doesn't exist, but it needs that solid validation before it can be shared. Okay, so say no to raw enthusiasm, say yes to deep tapasya, and that applies to some other dogmas that are there, and I'll briefly talk. Always ask, what is its use in the present circumstances? Like that is a criticism I hear. Many people say, okay, but what do we do with antiquity? And the question is reasonable, but you have to find the answer. I mean, I can give an answer, but if you have that question, just sometimes wonder, like, why people are so crazy to find out why something is so old. And this is not limited to, again, Indian civilization. This is limited. This applies to all the civilizations around the world. Everyone, the scientists, people, the civilizational researchers are very curious to know. And it's not just to know how old it is and therefore, pat on our back, feel good about it. Well, all those things do happen. But there is a bigger purpose. And one of the bigger purpose has to be, how do I use that information in my present circumstances? In present circumstances of dharma, artha, kama, moksha. I mean, that's why we are doing it. Otherwise, we wouldn't worry about it. Okay. So always ask that question. And what is required in this case is that meaningful curiosity. This is coming from Darshana, Gotama's Darshana. Meaningful curiosity, jidnyasa, creative doubt, samshaya of a buddhi, not samshaya of a mind, and intelligent anticipation. Okay, so what is your prayojan? Why are you trying to do it? Okay, in what way you create predictions, and how do you go about testing them? So these are some of the points that we will touch base on. Last 24,000 years, one thing that you have to take out from this conversation, based on a Shraddha, I would say, and of course you can read my works and be convinced, not just my works of many others, that every Indian can safely assert that India has a civilization, empirically evidence-based civilization, that definitely goes for more than 24,000 years. So if there is a one thing that you want to take away, definitely this, okay? Quickly, the number of you who follow my presentations have seen this. So though if you are not, I would encourage you to watch my other presentations, but I'm going to go a bit fast through this. This is today we are where we are, 21st century, going backwards in time. 0 is that 2000 years ago, and then -5 is -5,000 before that 0, which is 5000 BC, 10,000 BC, and so on. So one of my key work was to look at all the evidence from the Mahabharata text and to see if it can be used to date the timing of Mahabharata. Now, so I came up at 5561 BC, and Prasad ji is very familiar with the work of Dr. P.V. Vartak. Many of you would be actually familiar. What is very interesting, that itself can be a talk, like 5561 BCE, Dr. Vartak versus Nilesh Oak. You know, what is the difference? I mean, he is my inspiration, Dr. Vartak, you know, late Dr. Vartak. I have met him many times. In fact, every time I went to Pune, I made a point to meet with him. And we had a great communication going back and forth. But what is the difference? Because the date is the same, even the 18 days are the same, because I essentially borrowed from him those 18 days. But what is different? There are other things that are different, like Bhishma Nirvana, but why it is different? So the basis is different. Almost you can look at it like this. The answer is correct, but two different people came in the two different ways. And actually they are not always correct methods, but sometimes you can get a correct answer even when you do something wrong. Maybe do something wrong twice, and therefore it cancels out and you get the correct answer. Long story short, extracting all the evidence of Mahabharata took us to 5561 BC. Most of you know that. Ditto for Ramayana using Valmiki Ramayana evidence. And then Rigveda evidence. This is not astronomy evidence, but this is the hydrology Saraswati evidence. And what it shows is definitely the oldest portion of Rigveda are more than 24,000 years ago. And that's why I said every one of us here should confidently able to assert that Indian civilization is more than 24,000 years old. Okay, now just to give you a context, against this, look at where the European Enlightenment began. You know, that is not to put anybody down or anything, just to state the facts. Okay, this is in fact suggested by my British consultant friend, you know, who is very familiar with my work. And he said, Nilesh, against this deep antiquity, you need to put a dot about European Enlightenment, you know, just to put the context. Now, a lot of things, good things came out of European Enlightenment, especially in the field of science and technology. But there was the negative side, especially in the context of India, was the whole nonsense of Aryan invasion theory. Again, that's not the subject today. So I'm going to go further, which says, hey guys, you folks, you Indian folks, your civilization is here. It started 1500 BC and afterwards. That's it. Okay. Which is what a nonsensical statement against such a deep evidence that you see that takes us definitely to more than 24,000 years ago. And now we are going to see how far back it can go. Now, we should also take the point fingers at ourselves. Our blame is that Yuga dogma. Yuga has many definitions, but very dogmatically, very, it's a sad moment, I consider. The majority of us, majority of even you right now, possibly listening to this presentation, somehow wants to stick to that 432,000 years of Kali Yuga, twice that of a Dwapar Yuga, and 3 times is a Treta Yuga. And what that does, see, that reality exists, that definition exists, but that is one of the 30 different definitions. That definition may have a purpose. If you truly feel passionate about that definition, then I would encourage you to research about it and find out why that came into being. In fact, I created a video with Sattology, with Aditya Satsangi, and it says the logic behind 4.32 million years. Okay, I would encourage you to watch that. But that's the kind of work that is required. Instead of taking this blindly and trying to apply to history, trying to apply to antiquity of historical events, it's a disaster. Okay, so that's why I call that Yuga dogma. Okay, I'm going to go fast through that. Simply stated, there is enough evidence, more than enough, that we can consume in a single lifetime. 1,000 plus, therefore, I say, empirical, objectively testable evidence from multiple different disciplines of science that gives us a strong validation for last 24,000 years of Indian civilization. Okay, so that's my summary slide, you can say. Now, I mentioned that there is a limit of 24,000 years. Okay, it appears as if there is an upper limit going backwards on a civilizational memory. That doesn't mean civilization stops there, but apparently civilizational memory. Okay, I'll tell you why I think that could be. But here is one from someone's book. Some of you may immediately recognize it, but if not, this is was a great Indian researcher, and he's been badmouthed so much, and not so much by outsiders, but even our own Indian folks or many pro-Indic researchers. Granted, there are many things that he said which are not true, or can be shown to be not true. But how is he different than, say, Einstein or Maxwell or Newton or Kepler or Copernicus or Edward Jenner, whoever you want to say, any other scientist, that great name you want to say? He's not any different than that. You have to make bold predictions. Okay, but something I'm quoting, and anyone can guess a name. He shares the last name with me, P.N. Oak, Shri P.N. Oak, if you have heard that. From his book, he said it, and then I have heard this in many other places. According to some calculations, public historical memory at any given moment does not extend to more than 24,000 years. Okay, and then he goes into some other civilizational aspect. But that is something I found it very interesting, because in my research, I was finding the limitation of that 24,000 years. And I'll tell you my thoughts, why I think that limitation comes. At least there is an astronomy explanation for it. Quickly, Mahabharata, this is the date that I just mentioned about. And what I want to show you here is this, okay? So you look at one piece of evidence, you find out what that evidence is telling me. So when we talk of looking at the evidence in a scientific fashion, the two things should come out. One is that the scientific theory should explain that evidence, but that is not it. Many people don't get that. Majority of researchers do not understand this. The secondary aspect, the second aspect is equally important, that the testing of that evidence should lead to some kind of restriction. Okay, so like some of the evidence, like Arundhati Vasishta gave a restriction. Mahabharata war cannot happen after this date, cannot happen before this date. Bhishma Nirvana evidence gives a restriction that Mahabharata war cannot happen after this date, cannot happen before this date, and so on. If you look at additional evidence in Mahabharata, like the Margashirsha is the month of the war. The first day of the war was a Kartik Amavasya. It was the season of Sharad. So when you do that, you get these additional restrictions. It says Mahabharata war cannot happen anytime after 5000 BC, cannot happen before 7000. The reason I'm just showing this example, not to emphasize so much the Mahabharata research, but that's what the evidence needs to do for us. And that's how we will understand when we get to that 40,000 years of evidence. Okay, so that's how we figured out, that's how I figured out the Mahabharata. Ditto for Ramayana. So I'm going to go fast through this. Again, we start putting different restrictions. What you see here, no astronomy yet. Okay, only hydrology evidence. Yamuna started meeting Ganga river only after 50,000 BC. And Ramayana has Yamuna meeting Ganga many times. Many people in Ramayana refer to it. Okay, so what does that tell us? Now we have to bring the evidence, bring the logical reasoning, all that together. So if Valmiki Ramayana that we have access to has a description, Yamuna meeting Ganga multiple times, it has to be only after 50,000 years, 50,000 BC, right? So that's how we start putting the limit. But after this, I also started looking at the astronomy descriptions from Valmiki Ramayana, okay? And that brings us to a specific date, okay? This is how the scenario was at the time of Ramayana. It is given in Ramayana, okay? In fact, see, these are the verses that are quoted are from Valmiki Ramayana. Brahma Rashir Vishuddhasya, Shuddhasya Paramarshaya, Chishmantah Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshinam. Essentially, in a simple language, it is saying star Brahma Rashi, Vega or Abhijit was a pole star, and Saptarshis are rotating around it. Okay, that was a pole star. If we start from today, go backwards, the last time it was a pole star was, the latest event was 12,000 BC, 14,000 years ago. Something very interesting. At that time, you could not see the star Agastya, in English known as a canopus, from most part of India. So when the Vanara party is going to search for Sita, and Sugriva divides them into 4 different groups, and the group that is going to the south and Sugriva is giving them instructions, he starts from Narmada. He says, now you will go to Kaveri area, Godavari area, whatnot. We'll come to Tamraparni, and then you will get to the Mahendra Parvat. Okay, so that's the north, what you can say, not north, southwest corner of India, like Kerala, you know, the Agastya Malay biosphere now. And from there, he says, from there, you see as if Agastya's 1 feet is there and another feet is in the ocean, which is to say on the horizon and where he has become a pole star. That scenario also, you see it in 12,000 BC. Okay. Now, this is also mentioned in Surya Siddhanta. How fascinating. Okay. And Surya Siddhanta gives 3-4 different references that can be objectively tested, and they all come together as a puzzle for that 12,000 BC. So Ramayana is describing is Surya Siddhanta, totally unrelated in that sense, other than both are Indian texts. They are validating a civilizational epoch of 12,000 BCE, okay, for different reasons. Okay, look at the rivers here. What you see is this river above is Shutudri. The river here is Yamuna. And the middle, that big path that you see, there is no water anymore, is the paleo channel of Saraswati. Okay, the water used to flow, and it was a very, very broad river. But something interesting, Valmiki Ramayana, for example, has this reference for Shatudri, which is Satlaj. Radini Dura Paramcha Pratyak Stota Taranginim Shatadru Matarachidman Nadi Nadim Ikshwaku Nandana. Okay, so Shatudri is flowing in the west direction, and I showed it on the previous slide that Shatudri started flowing in the west direction only in 13,000 BC. Even that gives upper limit on the timing of Ramayana. The reason I'm mentioning is just like the Yuga dogma, most of our people cannot get rid of this notion that Ramayana has to happen millions of years ago. Okay, so I'm just sharing some evidence with you. So yes, if there is something happening millions of years ago, and I'm going to show you some evidence there, possible evidence, we can share it, but we shouldn't go simply based on some dogma, because we would like to see it that way, because we heard something like that way. Okay, so what is this 24,000 barrier, and can we break it? Now, one of the reasons I think it's a 24,000 year barrier, at least astronomy speak, is what is called the precession of equinoxes. So precession of equinoxes is the Earth's axis, you know, its rotation going for like 24,000, 26,000 years. So what happens is this, right now, our calendar, if you look at it, we call Ashwini as the first nakshatra. The reason we call Ashwini as the first nakshatra, and pay attention to that, because that's going to also take us to 34,000 BCE or so. The reason we call Ashwini first nakshatra, there are many reasons why something can be called first nakshatra. Okay, one of the reason is it's the beginning of the year, a year of a particular calendrical year. It is at one of the cardinal points, at the summer solstice, winter solstice, spring equinox, fall equinox. Okay, in our case, why we call Ashwini as the first nakshatra is because 2000 years ago approximately, Ashwini was at the point of spring equinox. It's no longer so. Okay, it has actually moved. In 2000 years, it has moved because of the precession. So my point is, if Ashwini is my first nakshatra, and I even keep on changing the nakshatra, and they are recorded in our ancient Indian narratives, once that 24,000, 26,000 year cycle is complete, again some old scripture, some text will say Ashwini was the first nakshatra, just like what we hear right now. So in some, say Upanishad, we hear Ashwini is the first nakshatra. Some Brahmana, we hear Ashwini is the first nakshatra. Start your yajna from that day. Now, we don't know whether that Ashwini as the first nakshatra is referring to 2000 years ago or 2000 plus 26,000 years ago. And I see that as a challenge. And that's possibly, this is my conjecture, for this astronomical barrier, you can say, of 24,000 years. Okay. But the question is, can we break it? Okay. And the answer is yes, we can. Now, before we go beyond that, there is another doubt that many of us have. So I want to address that. That doubt is, okay, but there was something I have heard about this ice age, and many people, if ordinary people do it, okay, they are equally guilty, because these days there is no excuse for not having a knowledge. You can just start with the Google, and you can get so many access to books, the PDF, whatnot, so many documentaries, YouTube. There is no excuse for ignorance, okay? But if ordinary people quickly may not grasp that, and they say, because I heard this, that's okay. But even many researchers are making this blunder. Even pro-India researchers, they are under the impression that if you go beyond 10,000 years, like beyond Holocene, it's like all cold, all ice age, everywhere there is ice, everyone is freezing to death, okay? And nothing else is possible. Not possible in India. That's what they're thinking. Okay, well, where is the water, they say? Well, where is the land? Where is the forest? Where is the grass? Well, these are some of the answers I want to give before I take you beyond 24,000 years, okay? Because people think, and that is correct, the LGM, if you have heard the word, that is the last glacial maximum, when the things were the coldest you can consider. Okay, that was around 20,000 years ago. In fact, I will show you, it wasn't exactly 20,000 years ago. It was 20,000 years and backwards. You can even go back 10,000 years, possibly another 15,000 years. And it was still considered ice age. But do we have a water? For civilizational, for survival, we need water, right? This is the map of India, if everyone can see it, where all the water is removed, okay? And so that you can actually see the ground, even the ocean floor. And I'm going to show another map here. And by the way, notice that if you go back certain years, the Sri Lanka and India, that in between area is not that deep, as people may not realize when there is a water, okay? But that's a different subject. It's a connected landmass. But I'm taking another, it's not a great shot. I tried my best. But just to show you, if you look into the northern portion of India, Bharatvarsha, okay? So this all Bharatvarsha here. Just see how amazing the picture is. But notice this whole delta of all the northern rivers, okay? So this is on the west side, the Punjab, and then the former Saraswati and all those rivers. And on the eastern side, Yamuna and Ganga, and of course Brahmaputra will come from there. This is whole modern day Bangladesh. How flat the landscape is, okay? Just notice that. And the reason I am showing this is that once you understand this, you can understand why a river like Satluj or Shatudri, why the name is Shatudri. Shatudri or Shatudri means hundreds of streams. That was the name of that river. Right now it's only one stream. It was more than likely always a one stream. But these, what you're seeing in the picture, are paleo channels, okay? And hundreds of those paleo channels, all of them are not active, but at one point the river flew there, or a distributary of that river flew there. The reason I'm again showing is something so beautiful, that something we should take it into account when we are researching, is all the names have a history embedded in it. So the river Shatudri is not just an ordinary name, or a kuch to name, we need some name for the river, so let's give one. No, it has come from, it has in it, not always, but in this case, the history of civilization, antiquity of civilization trapped into it. See, this is the fan area of Shatudri. In fact, Shatudri, Satluj, was the prominent tributary of Saraswati. For the reason, the rationale for having so much water, the greatness of Maha-Sarasvati is because of Shatudri, okay? And so it was so big. And so not a surprise that it was splitting into many such streams. That's why the name Shatudri, very appropriate. Saraswati also, because it was so huge, and you would see when there is a huge flow and a flood comes, then it will create some pockets. It may change the path of the river and so on. It may create pockets and may end up creating many lakes. So that's Saraswati, Sarovar, many lakes, land of many lakes. That is what it is referring to. All right, let me go fast. All right, so that's what it is showing. Now quickly, Maha-Sarasvati, how far it is with us? Okay, many people are of the opinion that the Maha-Sarasvati, you'll be surprised, even Saraswati researchers, they think that the Saraswati began 10,000 years ago. Totally wrong information. Okay, I'm going to show you the evidence here. If you look at the Paleo Saraswati channel, and this is way down in Kalibanga, I mean in the Rajasthan region, not even Haryana or whatnot. And I'll not spend time educating you, but look, just simply think of that yellow color. Wherever, how far below you can go yellow, that means there was a water. Okay, and this is the channel of Saraswati, 8 kilometer wide that they dug. It could be even wider, but what they dug is 8 kilometers, and the water was there for across that 8 kilometer width of it, going back to say 100,000 years, 150,000. We can take that as a limit. Okay, as an upper limit. So if we go as far as 150,000, definitely, or 100,000, definitely there was a water. So river Saraswati is flowing for a very long time. So yes, we had a water. Okay, yes, we had a water. I'll go through this. And then again, you can see the geographical limit of that 24,000. Something happened, which is what? LGM, if you pay attention, you know, last glacial maximum, that the ice was started freezing, the seasons were changing and whatnot. But something happened, the glaciers were not melting as much, water was still there, but not enough water. And something during that LGM, the water flow shrunk. And you see actually where I have made the circles on the top, the river Saraswati, actually Maha-Sarasvati became Saraswati, if that's the way I can put it. Okay, still there was a water, still it was a big river, but not as big the way it is described in Rigveda. Okay, so that gives us that 20,000 limit. Okay, let's go further. I just mentioned Yamuna meeting Ganga, so I'm just showing you here. Okay, based on the crystals that are brought by Saraswati into very lower streams, like this area, what I'm showing you is in Pakistan now. Okay, based on various studies, this is clipped, you know, in 2012, they have shown that Saraswati definitely, sorry, Yamuna definitely split from Saraswati and started meeting Ganga after 50,000. Okay, and there are many other studies now verifying, validating that particular conjecture. Okay, so I'll move fast through this. Okay, so do we have the right weather? Yes, we have a water. That's good. Now look at that number. 1 million years ago, 200K, where we just stopped. Saraswati started flowing from that time. But what if we want to go beyond 100,000, beyond 1 lakh years? Do we have a evidence of a weather? Do we have a evidence of human activity? Any kind of human activity? The answer is yes. Okay, again, as I said, many people think the India was shivering through the ice age. No, the weather might be cooler rather, but it was not shivering. The life was going on, civilization was going on. What this diagram shows, wherever you see the dark areas, that's where the glaciers were. That's where the ice age was. Yes, ice age was around the world, but the glaciers were not there in Indian part. This is India here, okay? This is Tibet and this is Himalaya, okay? This is going back, say, 25,000 years or 30,000 years, 35,000 years, and so on, okay? And what was happening? What kind of vegetations we had? Again, this graph is for 25,000, going back 25,000 years ago. But if you go further back, maybe there were no tropical forests, but still India had grasslands, India had animals, and so on and so forth. So this is India here. And if you go back 25,000 years, the LGM time here, we had a tropical grassland. We also had tropical woodlands. We also had desert, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that was there. Now, was the agriculture taking place? Okay, so I've just thrown some numbers there: 8,000 BC, 16,000 BC, 43,000 BC, 43,000 BC in the Indian subcontinent. Okay, not many people know that. This one is talking about human habitation, human presence, and actually the collection of grains, and then they call it what is the word, phytoliths, which is you know, the silicates or silicon based ingredients into the grains, into the plants, that gets preserved, and that tells you what kind of vegetation existed in certain period. Okay, so based on that, actually there is a human presence, but also other activities going back million years ago in India. Okay, so don't get stuck with were there human beings in India, you know, and we don't have to go to million years, but I'm saying they were there and there is evidence of it. Okay, again, people who are stuck in a peer-reviewed papers, these are peer-reviewed papers. Okay, they don't need to be peer-reviewed papers as far as I am concerned, if I can validate that. Okay, this is late Pleistocene evidence. This goes back to, yeah, the one I mentioned, 44, going back to 44,000 years, 43,000 BC. This is from Sri Lanka, okay, where these people may not be necessarily planting. We don't know that. They may be planting, but definitely there is evidence of people harvesting grains, people harvesting fruits, and so forth, going back to 43,000 years BC, which is 45,000 years in Sri Lanka, which is very much a Indian subcontinent. Okay, then very recent one. Now remember, once you get comfortable with a million years and 45,000 years, then 10,000 years ago looks like a recent, right? See, just how you get comfortable with certain numbers. This is from Lahurdev. Many of you would have heard it. Eastern part of UP, and there you can see the rice grains. By the way, the million-year paper that I showed you, even there is a presence of rice. Okay, million years ago. Just keep that in mind. Okay, it may be wild rice. It more than likely wild rice, but it is there. And here, cultivated rice going back to 8,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and so on. Okay. So we have to make ourselves very comfortable with it. Now, what does the Indian astronomy telling us? Okay, and all I'm sharing with you is a very, very conservative view. What I mean by that is, in reality, we can speculate some longer time frame, but I am not. Actually, I'm being very, very conservative in what I'm trying to say. So what I want to show you is, was the Indian astronomy keeping up with this? Because civilizational, in this case, we would say there has to be some civilizational activity like agriculture, like a settled civilization, possibly domestication of animals. And I'm not going to talk of domestication of animals. Some technology, some science, some philosophy, right? Do we see evidence of that? So if we just take, say, astronomy, again, I'm not going to go into domestication of animals. I'm not going to go into navigation. But say, this is what we have shown, many researchers, not just me, is that the current Surya Siddhanta that we have has many updates. Think of an update as a repair, okay? And all our astronomy text says that after some certain period of time, we have to modify. Because although it appears that everything in the astronomy is cyclical, that is true, but that is a very childish view. Actually, not everything in astronomy is cyclical. There are many things that never repeat. And there are certain things that are so unique that they happen only once, at least as far as the antiquity is concerned. Like my Arundhati Vasishtha observation that I worked on for 15 years from Mahabharata. It has only happened once. It has not happened before, and it has not happened since. Now, if you wait for another 11,000 years, then it will happen again. But as far as the past is concerned, it never happened. So it's also important to realize that astronomy is cyclical, but it's also important to get rid of the very childish, juvenile notion that everything is cyclical, therefore it could have happened anytime. No, many times the answer is absolutely not. Some of the events are very, very unique. So in this case, I'm calling the updates to Surya Siddhanta. I want you to think of these as a repairs to Surya Siddhanta. And our astronomy texts do say that periodically it needs to be corrected. How to correct this? By actually looking at the sky. Druk pratyay. You actually see how it is. You have your model here, calculation formulas, prediction. You look at this, and if there is a gap, you fix it. You understand why it has happened. You may fix the formula, you may fix the position, you may fix the constant, whatever it takes. So those kind of corrections are made here. Longitude of nakshatras was made in 580 CE in Surya Siddhanta. Myself and my co-researcher Rupa Bhattiji, we showed that the two-pole star that I just shared with you from Ramayana, but also Surya Siddhanta, it takes you to 12,000 BCE. This is what we presented at Oxford. Latitudes of nakshatra, another wonderful researcher, astronomy researcher, Dr. Anil Narayanan, former ISRO scientist, now based in Washington. He showed latitudes of nakshatra, the way current latitudes of nakshatra recorded in Surya Siddhanta. If you want to know when they made these measurements, he had shown with an absolutely phenomenal analysis that you have to go back to 7,500 years. And there is a reason more than likely why they made these updated readings in 7,500 years ago. But that's a separate topic. That's a separate talk. Therefore, I'll not go there. Very fascinating. Why that's so? The equation of the sun which is to know exact position of the sun in the sky. And many of you will think, oh, I can tell that by seeing it. No, can you predict it for thousands of years? The beauty is the equation of sun exists in the Surya Siddhanta, and it was the most accurate and precise equation for the predicting the position of the sun until 300 years ago, until 200 years ago. Only with the modern advent of more better telescopes, and now NASA sending Hubble telescope and getting more accurate data, now we can make it more precise. It's still, this is for a practical visual observation. The equation of the sun given in Surya Siddhanta is still applicable. Now, it was most accurate at the time of Mahabharata, 5,500 years ago, okay? And that is there. So anyways, that's another subject. What I want to show you is that there are many of this, and actually one question came before even my talk began, and quickly the answer to that question is here. Mahabharata has a reference of an ancient event when Abhijit was removed from the 28 nakshatras and turned to 27. And there was also a time when it was put it back, okay, some time ago. So therefore some grantha we see that. But the point I'm making about the Abhijit is that Surya Siddhanta indirectly refers to it. Mahabharata refers to it directly. Actually, it tells the event, take the incident. And there are some 8 different specific observations in Mahabharata, like Abhijit Spardhamana tu Rohini Kanyasha Swasa Ikshanti Jeshtata Devi Tapastaptum Vanam Gata. And so those 8 verses, specific 8 references, if you want to bring them together, match them, they only come together for 14,500 BC. Now the big point I want to make. Actually, I took a longer time on this because this is my passion. The bigger point I want to say is, when do you repair something? Something exists, like a house. A house exists for a long time, and when it becomes old, now it needs a repair. So if we are doing the repairs to our Surya Siddhanta for last, what is that, 17,000 years, 14,500 plus 2,000 years, let's say, 70,000 years ago. How old is the Surya Siddhanta? I am saying we have to go at least additional 12,000 years or 14,000 years. We cannot go full 26,000 years, because that will bring us same situation to where Abhijit was, right? The same scenario. But at least another 12,000, 14,000. So that takes us to easily 30,000 BC. Okay, that is my point. Okay, quickly, do we have evidence on the ground? Okay, just like our astronomy we're talking. Bhim Betka, I don't know how many of you have been there. I was there this January. There you see evidence of human habitation in the Narmada Valley. Okay, close to Narmada, 1.5 million years through 10,000 BP. Okay, these are pictures taken by me when I was there. And won't take your time, but at present, just like I showed you the evidence for agriculture or wild rice presence going back to million years, that was from Andhra Pradesh area, Andhra Pradesh Tamil Nadu border. This is from central India, Narmada. Again, a presence, the occupation, human habitation, human occupation going back to 1.5 million years, coming to our times. I mean, of course, to our times, but the evidence trapped that is observed there goes to 10,000 years from today. Okay, different tools and whatnot. Okay, so the pictures, the paintings that are done by them on the inner side of the caves and so on. So I'll go fast through this, and you can look at this 100,000 years and the reference to that. Okay, all right. Now this picture has been drawn by, again, as I said, my co-researchers, Mrs. Rupa Bhattiji. Okay, I've taken a deliberate portion of it. And so what we just discussed so far was into this area here. Okay, so 12,000 BC, that Ramayana, 6,000 BC, Mahabharata, and so on. This graph is very important. It starts somewhere at 20,000 years ago. That's fine. Actually, it can go back. But the point is, that is when the monsoon that we are used to in India somehow began, somewhere began. And then finally, it really settled into a well oiled machine, so to say, around this 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 years ago. But before that, the monsoon began, and I'm going to show you evidence of that. Okay, and then on that couple of points, we will stop. Okay, so now we have to break that 24,000 years barrier. So one evidence I'm going to show you is somewhere around this area. Okay, that comes from Rigveda, that connects in a very interesting way to Ramayana. Okay, the Ramayana that is yet to happen. Okay, when it is. And the second one, this is again work of my, Mrs. Rupa Bhattiji. You might be listening to her she writes a blog. She also has a few talks. Okay, so you might be listening to those. And this takes us back to around that 40,000 years. Okay, so let me walk you through that. Okay, so oldest reference to Sita. Okay, there is a, now of course we know that is in Valmiki Ramayana, but how many of you knew that Sita is also referred to? I'm not saying which Sita, but the word Sita, and in the very much in the context of agriculture, very much in the context of the plow, you know, because many of you will know the story of Sita from Ramayana, like how Mithila Naresh found her, right, during the agriculture, you know, so to say, and then he adopted her. So that reference also comes in Rigveda, not to be confused with a Ramayana Sita for now, okay, but the same Sita, and possibly why Ramayana Sita was given the name Sita. Okay, we have a reference from Rigveda. Okay, it is from the 4th mandala. Okay, 57 sukta, and then Rucha 4 through 8. And again, I'll not go into translation or anything, but I'll quickly jump and tell you there is a reference to 3 words: reference to word Sita, the reference to agriculture, like if you can see the word there, shuna na phala, you know, that is that plow there, krushantu referring to the agriculture, and then parjanyo referring to the rain. And if you also see Shunasirau, okay, Shunasirau. Now, this is interpreted by me, or interpreted by few others also, as referring to the starting of a monsoon. And you know when the monsoon begins? Monsoon begins at the summer solstice, somewhere there, okay? So just as approximation, what I'm showing you is that Shunasirau is this here, okay? Canis minor, Canis major, that is in the Western astronomy, the 2 dogs, Shunasirau, 2, okay? And summer solstice is here. Okay, so if you go back, that takes us to around 26,000 years, 27,000 years, 28,000 years. Okay, so possibly reference from that. And just a quick funny story related to this. So now the Sita word existed in that agricultural sense, and maybe that is why Ramayana Sita was named Sita. And in that context, I like to tell this story when somebody asked Mahatma Gandhi, you know, so it's like when you are saying Hey Ram or Sri Ram, or name of a Rama Rajya, which Rama you are referring to? You know, which Rama you have in mind when you are praying? And Gandhiji said, well, I'm thinking of that Rama, after which Dashratha decided to name his son. Okay, so that's that. Just like, so same thing would have happened in case of Sita, you know, we are just guessing here. All right, and then the last reference, and I'll stop. I'm at 45 minutes, so I'll take 2-3 more minutes. This is this reference. This is a work of again Rupa Bhattiji. What this does, it brings a celestial and terrestrial together, and frankly, I would say it brings also the calendrical. Okay, the calendar, and the India seems to have this very deep tradition of calendars. Granted, we have many years beginning from many starting points, but for a certain Samvatsar, for example, it appears as if it was always the spring equinox, and so on. Okay. So bringing different celestial phenomenon with a terrestrial phenomenon, and this goes back to Maitrayani Upanishad, the approximate time period, and I'm saying this for a deliberate reason, goes from 40,000 BC to 34,000 BC. We will also bring Surya Siddhanta for a minute here, but let me explain what it is. This is the graph. The x-axis is the time. This is 0 is where we are. We are going backwards thousands of years, 20,000 years, 40,000 years, 60,000 years. This is the sea level that we talked about. Okay, and again, look at that 140. Just before we began the talk, we were discussing, you know, 140 meters down there. And the same thing happened. This is going back 140,000 years. But when you come here to like 20,000 years before our time, again, we see water levels, ocean levels going down to that 140. And since then, they are only coming up. Okay. Again, this is a composite graph, so it's kind of a smooth. In between, there are some very interesting things happening, but not the subject today. This is a slide I'm borrowing from her. What she's showing here is a specific event, okay? And let's quickly get into that event. Okay, number of you would have heard this story of Agastya drinking the ocean. Okay, so that's coming from somewhere else. Agastya drinking the ocean, that's from a narrative. And that's why this is a beautiful description. To connect the dots, we need a empirical phenomenon, okay, empirical phenomenon, empirical descriptions of a phenomenon, then we need some kind of a tool, either a research, a evidence to objectively test it, maybe astronomy simulation if it's about astronomy. If it's a geological evidence, we need the ancient narrative to connect the dots, right? And when we can connect all of these, then we can say something with confidence. Okay, so let's see what we have. So here is, we have Agastya story drinking the ocean, like emptying the ocean, so to say. What you see here, somebody just seeing water levels going down significantly, and not necessarily in one person's lifetime, but a civilizational lifetime, and they're noticing it and they're documenting it. Okay, this comes from, again, Maitrayani Upanishad. So first Purapata, last verse, you want to call it. Quickly, I will make a point. It says, among other things, there is a drying of other great oceans, and this is the time of a Brihadrat. Now pay attention. Brihadrat is one of the king from Ikshwaku Vansha, from a Ikshwaku dynasty. He's one of the king, and in his time, what is happening? The ocean levels are going down, the mountains are falling, the pole star is moving. Now remember, pole star is always moving. You know, the precession is always moving, but something that is so distinctly noticeable that people said, oh, the pole star is moving. Okay, pole star doesn't move fast. I mean, it moves at the same rate in a way. The cutting of wind ropes. Okay, what does that refers to? Okay, that holds the stars, the latitudes, longitudes, you know, a lot of changes are being noticed. The submergence of the earth, and so on and so forth. What is the takeaway from here is the moving of a pole star, a longitudinal change in positions of the star, okay, and something to do with a distinct with the pole star. Okay, this is the information. If you try to bring this together, when that would have happened, again, the two graphs are similar. If we look at the movement of a pole star, as I said, pole star is always moving, but something unique is again a situation like that 12,000 BC, where the brightest stars in the polar region, Brahmarashi in the north, Agastya in the south, have again become the pole stars. Okay, now when is that? That goes back to around 36,000, 38,000 BC, that period of time. It so happens, notice the time here, of course the water levels are going down, but they start significantly going down, noticeable, the ocean levels I'm talking, in that period. Okay, and so that's what this particular graph you see here. Okay, that's referring to that 40,000 time period. But I also want to bring up, this is my last slide, or maybe second last slide, but the point is I want to bring the challenge that we have as we go back in further antiquity. Every time we are going to see this challenge, the evidence is going to get less and less. The evidence would have existed, but evidence available to us is going to get less and less. And to say something with a confidence, we need empirical evidence, we need ancient narratives from our books, and we need preferably empirical evidence from different fields. Maybe just one astronomy may not be enough, one geology may not be enough. And as we start plugging the holes there into our chronology, other evidence will pop up. It will help us interpret something that we could not interpret until now. Okay, so that's why, for example, this event is very, very important. And don't forget, this is my last slide, don't forget what I said. The Brihadrat, in the context of which the story comes, is one of the king of Ikshwaku dynasty. So it's not like the Indian civilization began in that 38,000 or 35,000 BC. And that the reference to that 34,000 BC is when Magha was at the Nakshatra Magha was at the spring equinox. That is the work of again Rupa Bhattiji. This is her slide. The reason I like this slide, I think, yeah, that is her slide. This is not like this is something proven and we just take it and say, okay, well, our civilization goes back to 220,000. No, but this is giving us some inklings. There are some references, and when we try to make sense out of it, they appear that they might fit here and here and here. But a lot more research is required, and therefore I said raw enthusiasm is not what we want. A deep tapasya is what is required if we truly are enthusiastic about knowing the antiquity. Quickly, my books here. If you are in India right now, there is a combo package, Subbu publication, 900 rupees, and you can get the 3 books delivered to your Indian address. Okay, not the Toronto address. Indian address, you can have it delivered for 900 rupees, all 3 books. If you're outside, through, what is that? Amazon, either Kindle or paperback. And my next books, in fact, I'm writing another book there. I'll not tell you that. Let's keep that as a some surprise. But the other book I'm working on is a history of Hindu civilization, as a holding title right now, just working title. Don't ask me when it will come out. Don't ask me, when it comes out, you'll definitely know. And before asking me any questions like, social media, please go to my blog.
Yes, sir.
Namaskar.
Sir, it was fantastic, your study about geographical by, you can calculate. It is very nice. Can you tell when the Ved or Upanishads are written in this, by this? You can, you could talk the time of Mahabharata and Ramayana.
Yeah.
But what is the time of Rigveda or Ved or Upanishad?
Okay. So the question is, can we date Upanishad? Can we date the timing of Rigveda and so on? So Rigveda, actually I date. Not always a fixed time, but I said actually the Rigveda, based on my research, and there are other people might have some different research that they might have done. Based on my limited research, I'll say that the Rigveda, oldest portion of Rigveda, definitely go beyond 24,000 years. Exactly when, I cannot tell. Now, if we consider Saraswati beginning around 100,000 years ago, and it's flowing to our times, then more than likely in the last 100,000 years, okay, beyond 24,000, but up to 100,000, the oldest portion. The newest, some of the newer portions, I mean, based on my study, I assert that they come to the time of Mahabharata. Of course, Ramayana, but Mahabharata. Okay, that's how I say Shantanu and Devapi. We know who they are. Like Shantanu is the father of Bhishma. And then there is a sukta referred to Shantanu Devapi, 10.93 or 95 or 98, something like this in Rigveda. When it comes to Upanishad, many times the Upanishad is what? Upanishad is a discussion between a guru, shishya in a summarized format. So unless there is a clue given to us, happens to be a clue that can be objectively tested for dating, we may not able to date it. In some cases we do, just like this Maitrayani Upanishad that I showed you the last reference. That now will tell us whether Maitrayani Upanishad was written then or not is a different issue. But Maitrayani Upanishad has an event that we can date to 35,000 BC or 38,000 BC. Okay, so there are, in some cases we do get evidence like this. Let's go to the next question.
So we have multiple questions from Shrikant Limaye. So
Okay.
first one he asks, actually they're all kind of related. First one he asks is, what is the origin of the concept of Rashis? Are they originating in the Indian subcontinent?
Okay.
Second is, are there references to the Rashis in Mahabharata?
Okay. Okay. And the third one I answered, right? The question about the Abhijit he had.
Abhijit, correct.
So I answered that. I hope Limaiji you said, right? So he got the answer. If not, I mean, if I didn't give a clear answer or wasn't clear, if you read my first book, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen? There is one whole chapter, chapter 5, I think, Fall of Abhijit. It's meant for that. And then you can combine that with our paper on, Indic India facts on this 2 pole stars. And you can also read work of Anil Narayananji, and then that will all bring it together for you, why Abhijit was removed or why it might have been removed. But the first 2, and the good that you said both, Prasadji, because they are related. Okay, so the second question I'll take first. Is there a mention of Rashi in the sense of Mesh, Vrushab, Mithun, Karka, Simha, Kanya, Tud, etc. in Ramayana, in Mahabharata or Ramayana? The answer is no. It is not there, at least not directly. If somebody wants to take some word and interpret that to mean that Rashi, that's a different game. And that could be true. I'm not saying that may be wrong, but no, there is no direct mention of it. Ramayana, Mahabharata, you see the mention of nakshatra, okay, nakshatra, lunar month, Chaitra, Vaishak, Jeshta, Ashad, that you see all the nakshatras, okay, slightly sometimes different names, but we can identify what it is. Same thing with the Rigveda. But now let's understand, before I answer the first question on the Rashi. Now Rigveda may have an indirect mention, actually it does have an indirect mention to planets. But Rigveda practically, I mean, just like the way there are descriptions of planets in Surya Siddhanta or Mahabharata or Ramayana, there is no such elaborate descriptions of planets in Rigveda. Now, are we to think, therefore, Rigveda folks did not know about the planets? That will be extremely ridiculous. Okay. But whatever the motive they had behind the Rigveda, whatever the reason, it may not be relevant, right? So today we are discussing this, and we may not discuss modern politics, right now in what is going on in India. Doesn't mean we are not aware of it. It's not relevant. We did not discuss it. We didn't think it's appropriate to even discuss it. So whatever the reason, there are no direct descriptions of planets in Rigveda. There are indirect, okay, but we'll not go there. Same thing, there are no descriptions of Rashi either in Rigveda or this, but in an astronomy text you find them. And we have no way to decide when those Rashis entered. Okay, so that's the first part of the answer. So they are not there in Ramayana, they are not there in Mahabharata, they are not there in Rigveda. Rigveda does not have direct reference to planets. Ramayana has it, Mahabharata has it, astronomy text has it. So remember what is happening. These are sets, overlapping circles. Something is common between, so epics and astronomy Siddhanta, the planets is common. Okay, epics and Rigveda, many things are common, but not the planets. Okay, now Rashis are nowhere here, but they are in the astronomy text. Now let me come to the first part. Are these, people say the Babylonians gave us Rashis. There are some good documentaries about the history of Babylonia, not the astronomy. Go and listen to them. I mean, if you look at the deep antiquity of Indian civilization, okay, the Babylonians were also part of ours in a way. That's a different subject. I'll not go there. But they are like a kids, like a kids playing in the ground, I mean, in terms of the antiquity. We're talking of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years max, as far as whatever they call Babylonia. And I'm being very generous. They even themselves don't go, they call Sumerians around like 5,000 BC, 7,000 BC, and then Akkadian, and then Babylonian and whatnot. I mean, these are the same cultures. Babylonian had a good astronomy, no doubt. In fact, their astronomy is very similar to Indian astronomy in comparison to Greek astronomy or whatnot. But the question is, did they give us the Rashi? And how many, I mean, again, we cannot communicate back and forth here. How many of you have heard Christopher Hitchens? There is something known as Hitchens razor. Again, that principle is there in Nyaya Darshana also, by the way, which is to say, whatever is claimed without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. For example, my good friend and one of the Indic researcher, Dr. Konrad Elst, he keeps on saying that Babylonian gave Rashi to India. But every time I ask for the evidence, either he changes the goalpost or he does not respond. Okay, my good friend, by the way, we meet many times and we have wonderful discussions. So Hitchens razor applies. Okay, whatever is claimed without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. I would love to see, I mean, first thing, Babylonia is our civilization, but if it's not our civilization, so what? I mean, Apple phone wasn't invented by Indian civilization. Almost every Indian has an Apple phone, I would imagine. So nothing wrong with, exchange of cultures, exchange of science and technology. But to answer your question, there is absolutely zero evidence, zilch, no evidence for Babylonians inventing Rashi and then they giving it to India. But I'm willing to be wrong if somebody has evidence. I have searched for it. I have asked many people who claim that thing, but then they go silent. I have not seen the evidence. Let's go to the next question.
Hang on. May I ask people to raise their hands, because it's hard for me to find people on the list, because I know I have questions. You're typing it up. Before I find Rajesh ji, there is one more question. Has the Satyayug started? If not, when will it start? Just a short one.
What is it? Say it again. Question.
Satyayug. Has it started or when will it start?
Okay.
Which yuga are we in essentially?
Yeah. No, I don't know who the question came from. Rajesh, you said? Rajesh
No.
Acharya?
Rajesh has to ask. This is from Raghunath Kedar.
Okay. I don't know if he understands Marathi, but no, Rajesh Acharya, I know he
Yes.
may not ask that question, but I know he understands Marathi. No, I would have said that. This is like Prasadji. I don't know if you want to. Does Raghunath Kedar understand Marathi?
I'm not sure.
Okay. No, but you may translate. I mean, this is like, we say what Maraठी मध्ये गाढवा पुढे वाचली गीता कालचा गोंधळ बरा होता और पूर्ण रामायण ऐकल्यानंतर रामाची सीता कोण, So it's something like this. In fact, what I emphasize today is that, and again, so the question asked is great, but it is only great because it helps me demonstrate the point that I am being very critical about. What will you do with it? In fact, if anybody asking when Kali Yuga begins, when Kali Yuga stops, has Satya Yuga began, it has basically not come out of Yuga dogma. Okay. And with all due respect to whatever that individual, so nothing about that individual, but I have no interest in answering that question. It just drags the progress of Indic Renaissance. Okay. So I would say, I would encourage that individuals or other individuals to watch my other talks, listen to many other presentations, not just my presentation, and if possible, if they choose to, come out of it. Okay. Yeah. Let's go to next question.
Nilesh ji, namaskar. Okay. Nilesh ji, namaskar. Rajesh.
Namaskar.
So my question is, there is also parallel studies going on mitochondrial DNA and peopling of the world, which is pretty accurate, and it predicts about how aborigines got to Australia and all of this. How does it tie in with your research about peopling of the world?
It's beautiful. It ties in beautifully. It ties in beautifully. So for example, even that same model, the presence in India, so we don't have to even go back further. Okay. In fact, now, I don't know if Rajesh, you are aware, but there is a sufficient evidence popping up from everywhere. I don't mean just India, for a beginning of a human race. It's not like only Africa. But what we have today as a model, which is well-established model with a good sufficient genetic data, it talks about Africa before 120,000 years, whatever. Then they came through, that Red Sea area along the coast to India. They were there in India by 100,000 years ago, 80,000 years ago, and then from there they went to Australia and so on. Okay. Even if we take that model, which is has reasonable evidence, but it's not to say that there are no holes in it, that is sufficient for what we are discussing here, like it's the last 100,000 years of Indian civilization. So even if we just take that, but if you look at, say, last 50,000 years and the genetic migrations based on mitochondrial DNA, like so the X chromosome side of things and even the Y chromosome, you will find time after time again multiple migrations out of India based on even genetics. Okay, going back to 10,000, 5,000, 15,000, 20,000, 30, 40, 50,000. And it gets even further corroborated when you start looking at the migration of domesticated animals like cows and pigs and horses and mouse. So yes, it's a very, very consistent. No, not only there is no issue with what we are saying here for Indian civilization, but actually the genetic evidence is very supportive of it. Now, likes of Tony Joseph, they just take it and make a mischief. I mean, that's why we have to raw enthusiasm on the part of Indians is not sufficient. Need a deep tapasya, so that not one individual, not few individuals, but multiple, every single Indian individual, very meticulously keeping a very calm head, will able to rebut the likes of Tony Joseph.
Dipinderji, go ahead.
Sir, my question is that Indus Valley, Saraswati Valley civilization is say around 5 to 7,000 years old, and we are able to get archaeological evidence of that, but we are not able to get means for that civilization we are not able to get cultural in terms of writings and all. We are not able to get much evidence, but the cultural evidence we are able to get for 2,500 to 3,000 years old. whether it is Vedanta or say Mahabharata also you were saying is 5,600 years old. We get the cultural evidence in terms of literature, but we don't get archaeological evidence for that. So why is it so that for the older thing, we are getting physical evidence in the form of archaeology, but for the later thing, we are getting only the cultural literature evidence, but not archaeological evidence?
Okay, no, great question. The question is bit confused, but but there is an element of truth. For example, archaeological evidence, let's say, will go to Mehergarh. Take Mehergarh. Okay, now it is in Balochistan. So that will go back to say 7,000 years. So like 7,000 BC. So that's like 9,000 years. Now you say literature evidence is only afterwards. Is that what you said, or the literature evidence is not there afterwards? Anyways, you may be on the mute. So there is bit confusion there.
Literature is available, means for 2,500, 3,000 years old literature evidence is there, or say 5,500 years old Mahabharata entire literature is available, but archaeological is not available.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you. Okay, so what is going to happen is this. Two reasons for this. One is a very simple one. As you go back in antiquity, archaeological evidence will get less and less. Okay, just for a simple reason, the pure aspect of time, number one. Okay, just that will just happen. The second one is that we should know what kind of archaeological evidence that I'm looking for, right? So for example, the things should get preserved, okay? And certain things do get preserved, other things do not get preserved. For example, iron, it rusts and it eventually gets dissolved. On the other hand, something like copper doesn't get dissolved, and therefore we find copper going even backwards. The third point is this, and that's a great question that you asked. Where is the archaeological evidence preserved? The archaeological evidence gets preserved. Even the archaeological evidence that we find in the Indus Valley civilization, going back 7,000, whatever, Mehergarh and whatnot, is because when we found the archaeological evidence there was nothing. Meaning it was like a mound, that nobody was using, let's say, and somebody happened to dig it by chance and found some pots and pans and weapons or whatever they found, because it was not in the use. Now, suppose you go to Prayagraj or you go to Varanasi and you want to find the ancient evidence. More than likely, the old sword was melted, remelted and used for something. What are you going to do? You don't go and say, excuse me, folks, I want to do some archaeological excavation. Please get out of your house. Let me dig there. You actually don't dig at a place where the civilization is still continuous and existing. So that also brings some kind of limitations. Fortunately, so we may not always look for archaeological evidence as we search more. There are now these sonar, I forgot, I may not be saying the right name, but there are these different techniques. Even without actually digging, you can see if there are older structures below the ground below different layers, and you can date radar, right? Yeah. So we have to think of a different technology, which also means in terms of evidence, we have to get beyond our limited view of archaeology of pots and pans. In fact, what I just described to you, say Satluj, Shatudri turning westward as described in Ramayana, 13,000 BC, or Yamuna splitting from Saraswati and now meeting Ganga, 50,000 BC, between 50,000 and 40,000 BC. This is archaeological evidence, okay? But we are also, not you, I mean, sir, but we or those people in a very traditional archaeology have limited themselves to finding something like a hooks and this and pots and pans and some kind of sword and some kind of needle, and only thinking that is archaeology. Well, that is archaeology, but that is just a small portion of archaeology. We seeing geological changes, even we can find based on the certain type of crystals that the rivers bring in their path, that's how they decided when Yamuna split from Saraswati and started meeting Ganga. That's archaeology. Okay, that's a river archaeology. So we have to think of a different definition of archaeology, but two things, again, just to summarize. If there is a living tradition at that particular point, we are not going to find archaeological evidence because the material gets reused, more so in the old times than in our times when we throw the plastic, and again, that gets reused too. And as we go back in time, the archaeological evidence by just natural definition is going to go down. And we may be lucky. I'll make one last point. what many people don't realize is that the amount of archaeology evidence that we find, and then we put that in the museums and whatnot, it looks like, oh wow, we found so many things. Now that is a true, that is fact. What many people don't realize is actually what we find through archaeology is actually 0.0000001% of what actually existed in civilization. Can we mute someone? Okay, let's mute that person. Okay, go ahead. So, sir, I hopefully I answered your question.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, actually this Harappan civilization, what we know about, we started we had trade relations with Roman Empire, Greek Empire, and actually I am a 9th standard student, sir. And according to what I have read, Rigveda was written in early Vedic period. But as you had said, our Indian civilization dates back to about 1 million years. So
no,
how
I didn't say that, but go on, yeah.
So how does this fit into
what I said, right? What
yes,
you are
sir.
studying in school with what I
Yes,
said.
Sir.
Yeah. So I didn't
Yes,
say
sir.
million years. I said the Indian civilization, definitely we can say 24,000, more than 24,000 years. We have a more evidence that is taking us to now 40,000. Actually, we know that will take us further back, but we have to go with a deep tapasya, not just the raw enthusiasm. Now, how does that mean? How does that match with, or what do we do with what you're reading in the textbook? If your textbook, that's a very sad story, but if your textbook is saying that the Harappa time is same as a Rigvedic time, I think that's what you said, right? The Rigveda was written in that time or so. If so, then that is not correct. I mean, unfortunately, what you have been taught is extremely faulty information. That's very sad, and this is not something I individually can fix. This is something each one of us, those people who are present on this call, but those who are not present, every one of us has to work. There is no point simply asking why the politicians are not doing it. If we bring enough of conviction inside us, then eventually there will be a moment, and eventually politicians will listen. That will happen. But in the meantime, you have to answer whatever is there in the book to make sure that you get the correct marks, you don't fail the test. So it's very unfortunate, but no, that information is absolutely wrong. Unfortunately, that is fed to us, and it's very unfortunate. Yeah, let's Prasadji, let's take maybe 1 or 2 questions. I have a hard stop. I have to get on another call. So let's take 2 questions and we will have to stop. Anyone else has a question?
Yeah, namaskar, Nilesh. This is Abhijit, not the one which fell off. I have a question. When you refer to this 45,000 years or even 1 million year ago, somebody must be looking at the sky, analyzing, registering it, and then communicating to other person. So my question is, are there any biological evidences which can tell like human brain was developed, our cords were able to communicate with other people, or whether we were making only monkey noises?
Okay. No, great question. Again, I don't have a perfect answer or even an answer to that. Again, as the science and technology develops, we may able to, and through even our yogic exercises, whatever it is, we may able to tap into more knowledge, right? But let's take a very hard external science and technology instruments or our genetic research. What we know, and there is no one exact date on it. Have you heard of a gene? I'm not getting the name. The name is called like a FOX7 something, that particular gene is considered related to our ability to speak. Now, granted, the animals also speak in some ways, and they communicate, but the way we can vocalize things and whatnot, that is related to that gene. Some people agree, some geneticists don't agree. Now, when it comes to when that gene was developed, the mutation formation, some people say 200,000 years ago, like 2 lakhs years ago. Some people say 300,000 years ago. These are estimates. I mean, genetics, we have these estimates. So somewhere there it was developed. I mean, that's what the modern research is telling us. So if that's the case, that will tell us, okay, so that's in agreement with what we're talking for last 100,000 years. Now, what about the million years? Okay, now what I just told you is that the million years ago, if you go back to that paper, there was the climate in the India was such that there could be plants, there could be what you call rice, wild rice, and there could be fruits. Okay, and there was some human habitation. We don't know, I mean, we don't know anything about the language, what they spoke. This is what the question you ask is a great question. We don't have an answer to that other than what I said. What we know is that possibly that particular gene was responsible for the language, and that emerged 200,000 years ago, 300,000 years ago. If that is true, then I don't know how they were speaking before that. If that is not true, then maybe human-like creatures, human hominids were speaking for a long time. I mean, that would be it. Okay, let's take one more question and then we will start.
Namaskar, Nilesh. This is Yadav from Toronto. I was born in Kashmir. And as you know, the current narrative globally is that Kashmir was never part of India. Kashmir was always an independent country, which I personally believe is not correct. Because Kashmir is truly called the fountainhead of the Indian civilization. What does your research say? I mean, how was, historically or archaeologically Kashmir always a part of India?
Okay, so I'm not much aware of what is the archaeological research in Kashmir. Culturally, Kashmir is a very much part of India. I mean, from the ancient narrative perspective, very much part of India, like Rishi Kashyap and that all those other things you would have heard. Okay. So very much part of it, but I'm saying why Kashmir? Okay, so Kashmir, that should not be even in a doubt that it is part of India. And we don't have to go that far back. If you go back, I mean, of course, our records say that, right? So Mahabharata, Ramayana, like Ramayana, Bharata's sons, okay? Bharata's sons were established in Gandhar, okay? Takshashila and Gandhar. We are talking, the Takshashila is that old, by the way, more than 14,000 years old, okay? So Bharata's sons were established there. The parts of what we will today called Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, okay, in our ancient literatures, based on the geography descriptions, you can say, and we have enough reason to say that, is that they were the part of Bharatavarsha, like Madra, Uttara Madra, Uttara Kuru. Uttara Kuru is like a Xinjiang province of China now. You know, what is that? Which is on the border with Kazakhstan, I think, okay, if I'm not saying the wrong name. So what to speak of Kashmir? I'm talking of the lands like Kailas mountain and land further north of Kashmir was part of a Bharatavarsha. Now understand, that time the boundaries were in the sense of a culture, right? Because their individual kingdoms could be there, not like the current nations state that we talk today. But very much a part of civilizational narrative. So that is one. Astronomy speak, we have certain observations, and the astronomers can say, astronomy people who have studied these and said these can be made, or these appears to be made from the latitude of say 33 or 32, 33. Okay, so that obviously can be in Kashmir. So Kashmir goes into that latitude. Same thing for Afghanistan, same thing for Iran and that area. So from astronomy speak, from the ancient narrative speaks, I don't know about the archaeology evidence. Kashmir is very much part of Bharatvarsha, not just very much part, but its natural location right now, it's the head. It's the head of Indian civilization. And I'm not saying this to make you feel happy. That remains a fact in terms of all the knowledge that is coming from Kashmir in ancient times. All right. So Vidyadarji, hopefully I answered your question. Okay, so I know I see many more hands, but I have a hard stop. And Prasadji, so this is a call on a very interesting project that is happening in India. And I have set up a call with them at that time. So
I appreciate that, Nilesh ji. You know, thanks for joining this call. You're, you know, as I said, we could go on forever. The list of questions will continue. The interest is great. So hopefully we'll have you back soon on another topic.
Yeah.
And this was fantastic. And those who have raised their hands, unfortunately, we'll keep those questions. Don't forget them. We'll keep it for next time.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate everybody for joining, and we'll continue this conversation again.
Okay. Thank
you all.